Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. If you were with me last week, you saw the video on how I showed you how to use the watercolor pencils 3 different ways. But today I want to talk to you about using watercolor paper and how that greatly enhances your image. So let's get started with the same pencils that I used on this image here. So I pulled those out of the watercolor pencil box and I'm going to use a blender pen for this simply because these areas are small. I'm going to show you how to use the aqua painter in just a few minutes. So last week we talked about how you can lay color right on the paper. We also talked about how you can scribble color on a palette on your work surface. And we also talked about how you can pick up color right from the pencil and then color in your flowers. But the one thing about watercolor paper that's absolutely fabulous that Whisper White cardstock doesn't have is the ability for you to go over it and over it and over it again until you get the desired hues and shading that you want without piling the paper. On regular Whisper White cardstock, which is what I used here, if you add too much moisture, either from the blender pen or the aqua painter, it's going to pile the paper, which means it's going to leave a rough textured surface and it's not going to look very neat. So again, this one was right from the pen. Here's from the palette. So I'm going to do this one back here. So we can lay our color down. And again, I want this side darker so I can go back in. And then again, here it is right on top of my flower. But you can see how much easier this is to blend than it was on the Whisper White cardstock. I am a huge, huge fan of watercolor paper simply because it allows me to go back over it. Even though this is slightly damp, if I want to add more color here, I can. And I can go back over it. I don't need to wait for it to dry to go back over an image to add more color and then smooth out those areas. So really fun. But again, you're going to want to make sure that you take your pen and that you clean it by rolling it sideways to get all that color off of it before you switch tones. But let's talk about a larger area. Here's my wheelbarrow. I didn't want it all gray because I didn't want it all to look like galvanized steel, and I didn't want it all brown, but I wanted to mix them. So I'm going to do a little brown and I'm going to do a little gray. So I've made a mixed palette here now. My pen is clean. I'm going to pick up this shade and I'm going to stretch the color across here. But look what happens. Because it's the watercolor paper, I'm actually able to do this without creating the lines or the marring of the paper like I did here. Can you see how the lines are a lot more noticeable here? Because the paper is not as absorbent. So I'm going to go back over this and I'm going to start all the way on this end and pull. You want all your darker areas to be on one side of the card to create an area of a shadow. So I'm starting here and I'm pulling across. And this again is the beauty of watercolor paper because it lets you go back over it and over it and over it. So isn't that really pretty? But let's work with the aqua painter on a larger surface. Here I have a much larger image which I'm able to use the aqua painter on. So just to clarify, I like the blender pen for very, very detailed images like these, and I like the aqua painter for larger areas to spread the color. So I've stamped this in basic black on Whisper White cardstock, given it a couple minutes to dry, and now I'm going to add my color. So this beautiful lotus, I'm just going to make mine pink just for the sake of the video, using the lines the artist put inside the image to lay my color down. And then I'm going to come in with my aqua painter. I always like to squeeze my tip to make sure it's not soaking wet. And then I'm going to blend out these lines. So I'm going to move my color towards the center. And you can see it's pretty effortless. And you're able to provide that shading because you've placed the pencil in the areas you want it to be the darkest. But let's say I want to add a little bit more color down here. The paper is wet. If I do that, what's going to happen now, even if I add another color and I shade, is the paper is going to begin to pile and it's going to start to look warped. I don't know if you can tell that in the video or not. But if you stamp it on watercolor paper, which I've done here, and I've used StazOn ink this time. Do not use StazOn on photopolymer stamps. They will eventually ruin them over time. So I'm going to bring in my pink pencil one more time and I'm going to go over those lines. Again, just like we did in the first one, okay? Add a little color there. I'm just going to make sure my aqua painter is clean. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to blend. But you're going to see a huge difference on how the color moves. This is just effortless. Whenever I teach watercoloring to new stampers, this is the paper they want because this makes them look like a professional every single time. The leftover color on my brush, I'm able to move into another area, which is even better yet. So if I want light and dark areas, I can really stretch this out. So you can see, huge difference between regular paper and watercolor paper. I hope that today's quick tip has helped convince you that watercolor paper is a great investment if you like to color. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.